folks from both the Cambridge Public Schools and throughout our out-of-school time community, STEAM community, everyone else in between joining us today. It's really exciting to have a chance to engage during what I know is a very unique and challenging time for us. Kari Milner, I'm one of the co-directors of the Agenda for Children, also Cambridge Public Schools contributor on the administration side. And I will be facilitating elements of today's meeting. We also have folks from the Cambridge Public Schools admin team, which you'll be meeting shortly, and a whole slew of folks from across our community. Also really on the help out in a big way is my Agenda for Children team. And they will also be in breakout rooms and playing different roles throughout. So let's see, I want to get a couple things going here. So one thing is for folks who are brand new to Zoom, I'm going to do a little bit of a Zoom crash course in a minute, but the first thing we'd like you to do is to find that chat bar or the chat room and to use it to enter your name, your title and your program. And then also what's something that you feel your program or organization has done well given the challenges of our COVID-19 closures. This is our first sort of opportunity to hear from you. And in lieu of doing a full-scale introduction of 30, 40, 50, depending how many people we end up with, and exhausting our time, we're going to do this. We also will have a breakout group, and you'll have a chance to meet the people in your breakout groups. So you can just start typing these into the chat space, and they will magically appear as you hit enter. And we'll be saving these too. So we really want to start today with an asset-based mindset. And so we really are excited to hear like something you feel like your organization or you've been doing well, given all the challenges that we're facing right now. Okay. I'm going to leave that up and I'm going to talk a little bit about our objectives for today. And they're going to start with, we're continuing to build on connections between CPS and the out-of-school time leaders as a community. We want to share key updates from CPS about the district's recovery plan, as well as some updates on FY21 budget. We're going to have OST providers share some promising practices and innovations being implemented during these COVID-19 closures. So in some ways, this opening is kind of a preview of that. We're going to provide updates on key efforts underway to remove technology and data barriers to collaboration. And we're going to collect additional questions OST providers have throughout. I'll explain that. We'll be using that chat function again for that. Sorry, I'm trying to silence these dings. But, and then we're going to set the stage for future collaboration and think about some next steps. So that's quite a bit, but really excited to have so many people weighing in today. Anybody who's just arriving, you can kind of see the first prompt, which is putting in your name, your title, your program, and what's something you feel like your program or organization has done well. If you could just type that into the chat room, chat bar, we will capture that, and excited to have you on board. Okay. So what to expect in this Zoom? If anybody has their phone number instead of their name, please try to help us with that so we know who you are. Anybody who's on a phone, or if there's some other, somebody else's computer you're using or whatever, just make sure that it's accurate who you are so we have a sense of who's with us next to your picture or your thumbnail. Also, at the bottom of the Zoom, you should have a button that says reactions, and that's simply for thumbs up and applause. We will be doing some screen sharing, which is what some of you are experiencing right off the bat here. Hopefully you're seeing my slides. I mentioned we'll have some small group discussions and breakout, and that's going to happen in the second half of the session today. And there's also going to be a link to a shared Google Doc when we do the small group breakouts. And some of my Agenda for Children team will also probably be there to help support note taking, but some groups may need to take them on their own. We're going to do our best to capture these notes. And if somebody gets stuck, you can just capture the notes on your own and send them to us later. But I think this should work out with one document. Each group would have a different page. I'll also mention that for the most part, we won't be using the raised hand feature to kind of do questions unless you have something that's technical or what have you. And somebody needs to alert me if there's a hand up, because there's a lot going on with the screen on my end. For people who've done this Zoom thing, know what I'm talking about. And then we'll actually have a whole segment for questions and answers. And I'll give you the prompt, but as the superintendent begins his updates, folks can start to actually enter questions into the chat room, and the Agenda for Children, we will capture those questions and then figure out some to bring to the whole group later on in the agenda today. And I will remind folks of that once we get going. So let's see. The other thing, just to remind folks again, this would be available since we're recording it. So folks on your team or anybody who's not able to attend today, that would be a benefit. And we want to keep that as a resource for our community. So just talked about the objectives while you guys were signing in. Here they are in writing. And just the run of today's agenda. This is the welcome part. We then will get an overview and an update from Superintendent Salim, followed by more updates on how we as Cambridge Public Schools and OST are working to increase our OST program's engagement with students through CPS tools. And we then will have some discussion about those issues coming down the road. We also will get summer programming scenarios, an overview from the superintendent, Dr. Salim. We will have some Q&A, as I mentioned, and then also some OST providers and innovators will be sharing some of their work for all of us to learn from. And we'll try to do a share out at that point and then wrap up with looking ahead and next steps. So one thing we wanted to share in terms of like ways of being is something that the Agenda for Children Out of School Time Initiative, if folks are familiar with our coalition and our work, we like to center ourselves as we engage. And that's even been the case as we do this virtually through the Zoomer. And so I'll just highlight what we have on this slide. Anybody who is on their phone or having it look small, I'll just say, we practice anti-racism in our relationships with one another. We are also practicing empathy and accepting others' beliefs. And even if they're shaped by a different life experience than your own. We bring courageous curiosity to our dialogues and our discussions. We really want you all to turn up the volume on your curiosity and ask questions that deepen understanding. I know there's also factual and technical questions that will come up, but we're trying to help our community to have more understanding on where we're at and where we're trying to get. Make space and take space. So this will be kind of a challenge in this format, but when you get into your small breakout room, like just really try to make space for everybody to have voice and try to capture the takeaways in the notes document. Assume best intentions and attend to impact. I think a lot of us are familiar with intentions versus impact, but we want to make sure that if something is said and it's taken the wrong way, that we have a chance to recognize it and not deflect it. Take lessons, leave the details. Again, this is mostly for the breakout groups. If anything is brought up that feels like it's personal, like make sure you're asking the other person if it's okay for you to share something. Otherwise, leave the names out. But if there's something that's helpful, like a learning, please, we always want to share the learnings across the Agenda for Children and out the rest of the community. Take care of self and community. Take what you learn. Let's nourish each other in our community and be present, right? And especially with sort of the moving parts we have today and the number of people, do your best to stay with us for these approximately 90 minutes and honor the work of your colleagues through your attention and presence. Okay, just to continue to just quickly set the tone, and then I'll pass it on to the superintendent. What you have on this slide are side-by-side for juxtaposition, and also looking for how these principles demonstrate how we are trying to live our our principles of partnership. Have these ideas in the back of your mind. So on the agenda for children's side, for example, one of our beliefs is young people and families are better served when systems and institutions that support them are aligned and connected, right? We also think that all young people to succeed, barriers to equity and access need to be directly addressed. And opportunities and experiences for youth are enhanced when people across different levels of power and perspectives learn together, design together, and build mutually beneficial partnerships. On the right, we really have some snapshots from the Cambridge Public Schools definitions of equity and racial equity. In terms of time, let me read the racial equity one. It means the absence of institutional or structural barriers experienced by people based on race or color that impede access to opportunities and results. And you also have some language there about equity and also about achieving racial equity. And so trying to just ground what we're about to hear about with the context of both organizations really being committed to some similar concepts, and that when we partner, there's mutual benefits. So if we could have Dr. Salim take over the mic for a moment. Dr. Salim, I will pass the mic to you.
Great, thanks, Kari. And can everyone hear me okay? Am I coming in? Great, thanks. So first of all, thanks so much for everyone that's joining this afternoon. And just to start off, I know it has been some time, it feels like. Certainly the last opportunity to sort of be with many of you was collectively was the OST symposium back in the fall, which does feel like a million years ago. And I just wanted to, before going into this update, just to extend my welcome to all of you and hopes for good health and safety for you and your families and friends. This has been a really important opportunity to be able to share some of the work that we're engaged in during this emergency closure, and so excited to be able to have an opportunity to share some of these updates. But on the next slide, just wanted to start off by really grounding it into with our commitment in the Cambridge Public Schools, and just the real opportunity around collaboration. As folks know, in our district plan, we've identified family and community partnerships as one of our 5 strategic objectives in our work, recognizing that the work is too important and also too difficult to do alone. And so we, in the many conversations we had over the last 18 months, emerged to think about this idea that really was brought to us by many of you as OST partners, about how do we think about a strategy that thinks about school, not just the hours of the day that students are in classrooms with educators and CPS, but thinking about how critical and important the time outside of school that students are engaged also with other mentors, adults, educators, and partners throughout the system. And so this idea around having a collaboration community-wide to think about students' needs before, during, and after school, and that key parts of that include strengthening opportunities for coordination, collaboration, and communication between educators and providers around individual student needs. I think too often we have these walls with the time when the school day ends and out of school time supports and programs begin. So trying to think about effective ways of breaking those down. Thinking about the coordination for elementary students was a big priority that we talked about last year, and are excited to of the work that has started this year that will be really deepening in the upcoming months and year to build on the success of the middle school network, of thinking about a network of supports for elementary students or youngest learners. Opportunities around maximizing support for shared staffing, training, and other support. I know through the Family Policy Council, as well as other ways, we've been looking for some of those partnerships and ways of engaging in shared learning and understanding, not just on the academic side, but also ways in which how we can also support all of our collective capacity around relationship building and supporting the social emotional needs of our students. And the last piece here around supporting families with summer programming. An important update I wanted to share related to where we are with the budget process. The school committee has held a series of budget workshops since the proposed budget I presented on March 12th. And we're able to present some adjustments just a couple of days ago on Tuesday evening. And one of them is having a full-time position to support the elementary OST network. Again, sort of building on some initial work that's happened this year, and also being able to collaborate with the team, including Kari and Annie, as we think about supporting learning for students and opportunities for students in out of school time space, and really building on some initial, I think, really productive conversations with our elementary principals and other partners to think about this from a real system-wide view. It also is a budget that includes some flexible funding to support summer learning, as well as a position that's actually partially funded by district funds and also partially funded by the Biogen Foundation to support data collection and use. So really trying to look at how we can leverage that support to analyze what we know. We're very data rich and have a lot of information on our students, and how we can use that to really think about the individual needs of students and families. So in the next slide, you'll see that, I don't know who's running it there, thanks. Wanted to just share a little bit of background and overview on sort of where we are with the emergency closure. As folks know, we made the announcement on Thursday, March 12th, that March 13th would be the last in-school school day for students, and that beginning on March 16th, we launched a distance learning model. That was version 1.0, where the first, at that time, we had announced actually a 2-week closure, not sure of the extent of the closure. Since then, have released a second document that is our CPS distance learning plan that gives a set of expectations to educators and a sense to families around what they should expect in terms of learning, that reflects guidance that came from the state around having learning experiences that are both online and offline, that also may be teacher-directed or student self-directed, and also comprise approximately half the school day. We also just this past Friday received additional guidance from the state as a companion piece to Governor Baker's announcement a week ago Tuesday that school buildings will be closed for the rest of the school year. And so a lot of it actually affirms the approach that we've taken here in Cambridge to think about how we really center the supports for students who have the greatest needs. The piece that is new in the DESE guidance is this idea around prerequisite standards. The idea being that what are the essential standards that students need in order to successfully start the next school year in the next grade level. And so we've been working with our team in curriculum instruction, as well as with many educators around those standards. And so on that front, I know that over the course of many conversations, and relating back to even the previous slide, there's been interest in perhaps having more information or understanding around some of the focus areas of students and educators in the district. And so certainly open to having some type of a follow-up session if folks are interested in that on these prerequisite standards and what they're going to look like in our schools. We're also in the second week of having a survey open for families. It's a short 5-question or 6-question survey to get feedback on what families' needs are during this time and some of their experiences with distance learning. And so we'll be wrapping that up at the end of the weekend and sharing some of that data next week. Looking ahead, I know we're going to talk a little bit later in the meeting around summer planning, but this is part of a larger way in which we're thinking about a recovery plan for our students. We know that all students have experienced this interrupted schooling over now what will be just over a third of the school year, 61 school days. And so that impact is certainly academic, but it also is an impact that also is social-emotional and may very well impact many students' mental health as well. And so we're thinking about both recovery in terms of academics, as well as the social-emotional and mental health needs, and not just for our students, but also thinking about the adults in our system and in our community, because this has been a traumatic experience for everyone at different levels and in different ways. But we are experiencing this as a global community, and we need to think about the needs of everyone in the community as we seek to recover. And also recognizing that it's not going to look the same when we do return, and that there's a very real possibility that we may be looking at rolling closures or social distancing measures. I'm sure folks have seen just coverage of the way in which different countries across the world have started to reopen schools, and everything from reducing class sizes dramatically to adapting games of tag where you're touching your friend's shadow instead of touching your friend, to having different partitions to keep different students separated. So even that alone will have a real deep impact on how we experience school, and an even greater need for the importance and centrality of relationships for our students, and the connection and community that we all strive to develop in our respective roles and programs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salim. And as he mentioned, he will come back with some more updates looking ahead to the summer. Right now, we're going to pivot and hear from some folks from Cambridge Public Schools ICTS department, Steve Smith and Gina. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe just in terms of just sort of teeing up Steve and Gina, I also think that, as we think about this time and doing work differently, whether it's Zoom calls or thinking about how we're relying on sort of a lot of technology, that there are just real opportunities around collaboration and doing things and accelerating some innovation and improvement. So some of the ideas that we'll be sharing here really have come from discussions and ideas that you've generated over time, and so just excited about being able to share some of this work with you. Steve and Gina?
Yeah, thanks for adding that context.
Yeah, so two of those areas that we're excited to share ways to collaborate with out-of-school-time partners is we recently in Cambridge opened up YouTube to all our students K through 8. We had it open for our high school students, but we saw in this time a lot of content being shared through the YouTube platform. So we wanted to make sure there was access there. So students now have access when they're on a school-issued Chromebook at home to YouTube. It's a restricted level, which means it requires teacher approval of some content. And so in that way, Kari and Charlene are serving as teachers in the district and able to approve any individual videos or YouTube channels that an out-of-school-time partner may want to request access to. And then the second piece is we have a process within the Cambridge Public Schools where teachers can request approval of online applications that are housing student data. And when we are talking about student data in CPS, we include student work in that definition. So not just personally identifiable information like name and email address, but also the work and the content that students are creating. So if you are coming across trying to work with a student and they're conveying to you that a site is blocked or something on their CPS Chromebook, it might be because that app isn't approved for use in the Cambridge Public Schools. And so we have a form that's linked there where you can submit a request for us to look into an app. We vet it against whether it's educationally aligned with our goals, and then we seek a student data privacy agreement from the application to ensure that student data is protected. And that link's there. And again, it's a process that you can submit, and you kind of get updates as it moves through the process in terms of getting approved officially. I say that also in knowing that you, out of school time partners are in a different environment than Cambridge Public Schools. And so you definitely are using a lot more applications than we are necessarily. So it's not a requirement that it has to be an approved CPS application, but we just wanted to make you aware that we do have this process in case you're getting feedback from students that something's blocked on their Chromebook.
Great, thanks, Gina.
Hey, Steve, before you start, I just wanted to remind folks, if you have questions, to please put them into the chat bar. Thank you, Steve.
No problem, Karen. Yeah, so thanks, Gina. This is Steve Smith. I want to talk a minute about some opportunities for you all to engage with our students, hopefully a little easier through some of our tools, and specifically our G Suite for Education environment, meaning Google Meet and Google Classroom. And what we are going to do is offer the opportunity for staff in your organizations to have basically Cambridge Public Schools G Suite accounts that they then will be able to use all the tools within the G Suite environment to interact and engage with our students. To facilitate that, we are in the process of creating what we're calling a community partner portal, which you'll hear a lot more about in the next week or so. And that portal is going to serve two purposes. Every organization will have a kind of super admin account on that portal to manage their organization's information. And the two purposes of that portal are, one, to request those G Suite accounts that I just mentioned. So you'll be able to identify staff in your organization that should receive CPS Google accounts, and then through an approval process, the creation of those accounts will be automated and emails sent out to those individuals with their credentials. Then the second piece is to help facilitate some information sharing between CPS and your organizations as far as student enrollment. We're developing a hopefully much easier way for you all to identify our students that are enrolled in your programs by looking them up and identifying kind of dates of enrollment in your programs. And again, this is in development right now. The details about how to log in and start creating these are all becoming in the next, let's say, week to 10 days. There'll be training opportunities as well to use those tools. And I think Lindsay might be speaking about the language piece the last time.
Hi, everybody. So another piece of another barrier we heard from that might be true for some folks is that if you don't have a live translation tool that you're already contracting with, it may be hard for you to engage with students or families that English is not the best way to communicate with them. So one of the tools that we have is something called Language Line, which you basically call in and a translator live translates the conversation in a third party kind of way. And one of the things we can do, our team has looked into, if there are folks on this call who, I think the city programs already have access to such a tool, but if the nonprofits don't have access to such a tool and want to take advantage of ours, we've set up another way to support and the billing on that. So we can, from now till the end of the school year, do a pilot where we can have you just take advantage of our tool, and we'll cover those costs for the rest of the school year. and we can figure out if that's something that would be sustainable and useful moving forward. So again, I don't know how many of you would benefit from a live translator for engaging with families and students, but if you would benefit from that, we'd like to make that happen.
These are just kind of the timeline of when we hope to launch these enhancements. And basically, we hope by the end of May, everything that we talked about will be in place. I don't know if Lindsay or Kari, you have any other details you want to get into at this point on this one. The actual, like I said, the actual details of the process of an administrator from one of your organizations logging into the portal, you'll receive much more information about that, the process, as well as training opportunities for the new portal.
Right, I'll just reiterate that we'll be working to do active outreach to programs, and we also will be receiving, of course, requests. You can email me directly. Anybody else on the Agenda for Children team, you can reach out to, and we can figure out how to best connect, and then go through the steps. This is all new, and you know, as you bear with us to, in many ways, pioneer some new terrain. This is something we've been waiting a long time to be able to do in an efficient way. There are some organizations out there that have different kinds of data sharing agreements. This is different, and this is an opportunity, particularly during this closure, to bolster our ability to partner in support of our shared students. And so there's, you know, on this chart, some different, you know, pieces that will give you a sense of the steps we need to take, but we will walk through the steps together with each program, so you don't feel like you have to memorize this and get a pop quiz. The other thing is, I'll just remind folks, this is being recorded, and so you can watch this again. We can also share notes and share these slides later. And if you have questions, again, put them in the chat line. Did Lindsay or Gina have anything else you wanted to add at this point?
Just on the language line, so I'm seeing a few folks that are saying it might be helpful. So we'll send that information out and a way for you to contact us if you want to take advantage of that. That's all.
Great, thank you. So I want to toss it back to Dr. Salim for some updates or some thoughts on summer scenarios, and then we will go into some Q&A. So if you have questions, to make sure you get them in now. And any questions we don't answer, just to be clear, we will log and we will figure out ways to hopefully follow up on each of them that we can. Kenny.
Thanks, Kari. So yeah, I know lots of questions around summer, and the way we have been thinking about this is, if you click on the next slide for me. So there were essentially, you know, 3 scenarios that we were trying to work off of or consider, you know, even as early as a few weeks ago. And, you know, the first, I'm sure many of you have been thinking in the same way, but the first would be that we, you know, actually would launch in person in July with possibilities of needing to close again. A second scenario where we would maybe launch virtually and stay virtual over the course of the whole summer. Or this third scenario, which would be to launch virtually at the start of the summer, meaning no buildings would be open, with a potential shift to in-person in August. And this is the scenario that we're leaning towards, and where we want to, you know, hear from you any extra key questions around that, any red flags there might be around this approach. And where it comes from is you know, recognizing where we are today, with the governor extending the closure of non-essential businesses now until late May. And also the way that Commissioner Riley from the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has also talked about the idea around summer possibly being a time where, you know, almost like a soft launch or some pilot of students' in-person engagement ahead of the start of the school year. And so, you know, that shift to in-person in August probably is with a pretty significant footnote of potentially needing to have some version of social distancing or other types of accommodations. So I'll pause there and maybe just give an opportunity for folks to share thoughts in the chat box around key questions related to this sort of summer scenario idea, and you know, interested in your thoughts and feedback.
Great. So we're seeing some questions here, and just with the number of things that I'm managing on my side here, I'm actually going to ask for some help from my colleague from the Agenda for Children, Barbara Murphy Warrington, our community specialist, all around expert and experienced contributor on professional development in other areas. And Barbara, if you could help post one of the, or I'm sorry, actually just state one of the questions that you want to pull that can help us launch into some discussion, and I can help to navigate who from CPS can kind of contribute some answers to that.
So hello, everyone. There's been a question or several questions around translation, and coming from Justina Crawford and Aaron Johnson, excitement about the translation possibility. The question is, will CPS be able to provide assistance with translation of schedules that are sent to families? There's a lot of excitement about a potential live translator system. That would be good. Could you speak more to that?
Great. And so let me ask a clarifying question. Can you tell whether we say schedules? Are you saying, what kind of schedules are you referring to? Summer schedules? Or are you saying something else, Barbara? Your reference to schedules?
Translation of schedules that are sent to families.
Okay.
So to the extent there are schedules being sent out to the families, can they be translated as well?
Okay.
That's how I understand the question.
Okay. Thank you. Lindsay, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So we haven't contemplated covering the cost of written translations. As you can imagine, those are quite a bit more expensive. And if we did those for all the programs, it might be too much for us to do. I don't want to say completely no, though. So why don't we take a look at what you're thinking about, the size of the documents, and maybe it's something we can handle. It might also be something that we could think about what's the right way to get an Agenda for Children account that maybe could support multiple nonprofits with something like that moving forward, and even into future years. So I can't completely commit to a yes now, but definitely don't want it to be a no either, if that makes sense. But we can help.
Thank you. There have been a lot of, Maria asked the question about, can CPS share the survey data with OST programs so we can use that family feedback as we plan online summer programming? Lindsay, I think you said a high yes to that, and there are a number of other OST sites that are saying that's very important for all of us. Do you want to speak a little bit more on that particular point, Lindsay?
Sure, I'll just be brief. Absolutely, yes, we would love to do that. We'd love to be in conversation and community with you about how the right ways to and best ways to respond and use that data as well, because we all know data is only as good as if we use it. So let's figure out how to make that happen.
Thank you. From Ellen Thompson, excuse me? From Ellen Thompson, there's the question. She's wondering about students with IEP services and CPS's plans for these students moving into summer and fall.
Okay, I don't know if Dr. Salim, if you want to take that. We do not have our director of OSS on this call, but let's give it a shot and see what we need to follow up around.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. And I think that, you know, there has been so much kind of like ongoing evolving guidance from the state. that's come from federal guidance, to the state, to almost like kind of weekly changes. So I know for many of our OSS staff that are working in our buildings, it does feel like this, this kind of like just constantly evolving situation with new requirements. We do plan to have some version of our extended year program certainly running, and they may be more in a distance learning set, but in terms of other types of supports for students with IEPs, we don't have details on that yet, but it's certainly something that our team has been working on, and we'll sort of look to share information as we develop that.
And Dr. Salim, we have another question for you coming from Meg Ito. Can you share with us any insight about if school buildings and school grounds and gardens and green spaces will open this summer?
So I think this is something that really is going to depend on sort of both state and Cambridge Public Health guidance in terms of, there's sort of the question around, can we, it's really not a question, it's the question of, can we open buildings and under what conditions? And so, what the requirements around social distancing might be as part of that reopening. So that's why, we were leaning on this sort of idea around scenario 3, because it does seem that we need to, as do all of you, start planning. I know your planning has already been underway, but really sort of have that decision around what the context is or what the mode is at the beginning of the summer, with the hope to then shift to in-person at some point later in the summer.
So there's another question that's coming in from Lisette Castillo. Are we hoping to use the same model of virtual learning Google Classroom teachers are using now for the summer?
So that is the platform that is utilized primarily, although there are a number of different apps and other types of technology tools that certainly educators and others could be using to engage students. So I don't think it would be constrained to Google Classroom, although in many ways that is sort of like the kind of the foundational kind of platform that's used by our staff right now.
So Dr. Salim, I'm going to try to combine two questions, which I think are directed to what's going to happen into the summer and fall as you spoke. The first one is coming from Jane Hershey, and she's expressing concerns about telling families what our program will be like for their child. Can we all get supported in a ramped up recruitment whenever the scenario is decided? And from Dana Johnson, she says, whichever scenario you go with, hope you're going to make this consistent across the board for all schools, because now we have some schools doing some things one way and others doing it another way.
Is the question on consistency around whether or not it's happening in person or remotely?
They're talking about whatever scenario for summer programming that is decided on ultimately about the schools, for school. Jane is asking, can OST programs get support in a ramped up recruitment whenever that scenario is decided? And Dana is asking or making the statement, let's make sure that whatever is decided, it's done consistently across all of the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the question, we want to be able to get to this decision soon, so that there could be, potential exploration around shared registration or other ways on the recruitment question to be able to help folks. I know there was a question earlier around the Mayor Summer Youth Employment Program. So we've also been had some preliminary conversations with Human Services program leadership around all of these. So yes, and then the second piece, the idea around or the sort of the question of when we can shift to in person, again, is a public health related decision, and so that certainly would be consistent from building to building.
Thank you. And Dr. Salim, another question for you from Andrea Green. if you choose to keep the school buildings closed until August, will programs have an opportunity to get in before August to prepare classrooms and prep spaces?
You know, I'm not sure, and I think that's something we can you know, kind of investigate further. I think right now, I mean, a lot just depends on what is the larger context in which we're working. Right now, you know, we have our buildings closed. We do have educators who have wanted to go into buildings, and we've really sought to limit that because of the social distancing guidelines. And you know, there are some real, you know, health impacts that can that do happen. So a lot of that will be just part of the overall, you know, kind of timeline decision.
And sort of related to the school building situation, Dr. Salim, and I'm editing as I read. What are the what cleaning safety protocols will be put in place with regards to facility staff for cleaning during camps? Over the summer, they are not responsible for cleaning spaces that our camps they are using, because they are responsible for cleaning and prepping non-summer use rooms for the fall. That's kind of, I'm not sure you understood that question.
I mean, I get the spirit of the question, and you know, I think like with many of, I think a number of questions. I mean, I think I appreciate the, you know, you're flagging these areas for us to, if we don't already have it on our radar, to add it to our list. You know, I don't have specific answers to that. I think that a lot of those protocols, you know, have yet to be quite developed, and particularly on sort of a day-to-day basis. I mean, we have, you know, after the closure, all of our custodians work really hard to disinfect all of our school buildings, but of course that's a level of cleaning that, you know, goes above and beyond what is, you know, what is typically done in a school day. And so, again, a lot of that I think will also be informed by what we're learning by the kind of the larger guidelines from CDC, which does, you know, have guidelines for various, you know, not just school, but after school, out of school time, early child care programs and the like.
And Dr. Salim, just for purposes of clarification, because there seems to be a bit of confusion about summer programming, could you clarify what role or involvement CPS will have with regard to summer programmings? And are you proposing content for OST programs? If you could speak just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this isn't about sort of, you know, CPS having solely programs for students. This is about, you know, in Cambridge, this is about, you know, trying to look for ways of having collaboration and opportunities where we can really, you know, work together on as part of thinking about a recovery plan for our students. So it's more of an overall, you know, kind of framework. Is the idea around this. When I talk about sort of launching virtually in July with no buildings open, with a potential shift to in-person in August, as a scenario, think about that as a scenario for, you know, all of our programs.
And there's a question around economics, and I'm going to paraphrase this, Dr. Salim, so I hope it's clear. Can CPS speak a little bit more as to whether or not it's working with the Department of Early Education and Care to coordinate what they should expect from their programs that traditionally run full-day summer programs? The question is being asked because the decision will impact OST reimbursements and potentially the stability of the sector that typically runs summer programs. And specifically, what will CPS do to ensure that the system of summer programming, especially those run by community-based organizations, is not negatively impacted from an economic perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know some of the specifics related to what early education and care. I mean, I know that, I mean, as I'm sure most of you as well, that, you know, the governor's directive is to have all early childhood programs closed until the end of June at the earliest. don't have an answer specifically around reimbursements, in terms of how the impact is. I'm not sure if Ellen Semenoff, if you're on, if there is more insight that you can share on this particular question.
I think what I can share, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I can share is I understand what the concern is, that if CPS were to run school day programming that took up a significant part of the day and that impacted the rates that the state was prepared to pay or pay any rates at all for children who would typically be served in out of school time programs. I think the concern is that it would no longer be feasible for some of the out of school time programs, which rely heavily on the state subsidies to run programs. So if there were collaborative programs being run or some amount of time that were school programs, how would that work and impact? I think that's what, I don't have the answer, but I think that's what the issue is that Erin was raising.
I see. Okay, well, I appreciate the question. And just for flagging it and thinking about it, and I don't know what the implications are for programs that have, participation that include both an academic and out of school time component to it. I think that would be something I would be interested in learning more about.
So we're up against, in terms of the time for Q&A, as we close out here, this part of the agenda, we will take every question, and my team and the CPS team together will review them and think about how we can best find some more information for folks seeking it. And anything we don't have an answer to, which is definitely possible, try to provide updates when they become available. Before we pivot to hearing from our innovators in the out of school time world, I actually, these are maybe two quicker answers from you, Dr. Salim. I also saw them in the chat line. The first is just one additional point of clarification on summer, and then which is, are teachers going to be assigning any specific work over the summer, or curriculum departments, or anything different than what would typically happen over the summer? That's one question. And then the other question would be around graduations. And is there any plan for virtual graduations, or has anything been talked about on that front?
Yeah, so there will still be some version of end of school year celebrations. Of course, the impact of this pandemic on important milestones that students would otherwise be experiencing is something we want to, as much as we can mitigate that loss, is what we're seeking to do. But it would be happening in some kind of virtual type plan. And there's some groups that are, particularly over at the high school, that are working on some possible plans there. Sorry, Kari, I lost track of the first part of your question.
Is there something different that teachers or curriculum people will be doing for the summer? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we're still, really trying to map out really thinking about this as like an 18-month plan of thinking about what will our students need, again, both academically and social emotionally, in the return as part of a larger recovery plan. We are planning to use assessments and screeners to be able to determine the needs of individual students in terms of their academic needs in particular, but then also potentially thinking probably not this spring, but perhaps in the fall, of thinking about also SEL screeners for our students as part of this. We haven't made a specific decision around specific assignments or tasks that happen. I think everything is so fluid, but we're trying to think about multiple scenarios and multiple resources that we might provide to students.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Salim. Thank you, Barbara, and everyone who contributed questions. We did our best to cover a lot of ground there, and I hope that was informative. Particularly on the summer piece, you'll notice in the bottom of the slide, we do have a plan to have another follow-up Zoom in May to talk about more updates on the summer, or if you will, the 18-month game plan. And there will be a doodle, I believe, available to kind of get us on a good date and time for folks although this seems to be a good time. We have a lot of folks on here, which is a great
Yeah.
situation.
And thanks, Kari, for bringing this together, and the ICTS team. It's great to just be able to get, again, all the flagging all the questions and concerns that folks have.
Terrific. All right, so now I really want to pique your interest and your attention to hear from several OST programs to share about what they've been doing during this COVID-19 closure and some of the innovations they've been using to support remote learning, to do outreach to students and families, and also maybe how they also are supporting staff. So let me get my screens in order. Oh, there was our Q&A. So this is the order we'll be hearing from folks. We're going to start with Lisette Castillo from the Amigos Community School. Let's just make sure everybody's hearing Lisette.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for the opportunity. So some of the efforts that we're doing during COVID-19 immediately began on March 16, which was the Monday that we were at home. And some of the approaches are in place or are continuing to be developed based on the follow-up conversations that we're having with fellow directors in our departments. My program has about 140 kiddos who are enrolled. So every week we send emails to all of our families. We also schedule one-on-one calls that parents are requesting. And this includes sharing activities, whether it's reading, parent check-ins, staff videos. Prior to April vacation, I made about 70 calls during those weeks just to connect with parents and make sure that we were able to provide whatever resources are possible. We are currently identifying what are the most equitable and accessible online programs for families that are flexible within their time frame. We're trying to be mindful and keeping in mind the great work and effort the morning educators are doing for our students. So we're trying to identify enrichment activities that are there. And that's a conversation for us to have in our directors meeting tomorrow. A suggestion of an organization that I think does incredible and intentional good work is Empower, with the director of Nancy Lee. And that's something that we look forward that we can connect with fellow directors about the possibility of collaborating with them. And in addition, we are creating an online site where families can have access to recreational activities, whether it is virtual field trips of museums, enjoy quality time games at home, family health connections, parental self-care and mindful exercises. And we're trying to compile together as much as possible free online resources that are meaningful, not just free. And trying to also put together resources for parents of children who are autistic or with ADHD so that they can have additional resources. And lastly, I also want to share that many of the colleagues in the community schools are really ready to begin some work in collaborating with the district and with all of our families, but that this work really requires, it requires collaboration. It requires for us to identify really incredible programming and to identify strong staff that can lead. Also keeping in mind what is the final decision of Cambridge Public School as to whether or not they too will be running a summer program, and I know that's still pending. So that's what we're doing right now.
Thanks, Lisette. Assuming that you're done right there. All right, I didn't want to cut you off. All right, so next up, we're going to hear from Solomon from City Sprouts.
Hey everyone, my name is Solomon Montagna. I'm the program director here at City Sprouts, and as soon as we kind of heard that schools would be closed, we thought about how we could support teachers and support youth and their families. And so one of the first things we did was create a series of YouTube videos that we could share with our teachers, who then could share with their students. From this, we created a YouTube channel that's recently been approved by the district to share with families, and it's all about like science and what youth can notice in their surrounding environment. So, and it keeps you safe, but at the same time, it lets them explore outside their home, lets them continue science, and most importantly, it helps support our teachers with new and exciting content. After we did that, we began to think about how we could support our outside of school time opportunities, our clubs and our youth leadership team. So we immediately started contacting families and asking them if they're available during our normal club time. So we tried to keep everything the same to make sure that it was most convenient for youth. And especially with our youth leadership team, we were able to get all of our youth who were participating during the school year pre-COVID-19 to participate now. So our garden educator, Kata, is doing a really good job of meeting families where they're at, which means in some cases using their preferred method of communication. So she's texting them if they prefer that. She's emailing them and she's calling them, and she's providing them with resources, making herself available and showing that she's here and has made a connection with her youth and sharing that with families. So she's trying to keep them updated in all the ways that she knows how and using the ways that families want to be updated. From there, to continue on with our middle school youth, we are creating weekly challenges for them to do at home and opening this up to the wider middle school youth community, not just those who are involved with City Sprouts directly, but to everyone. So these weekly challenges are engineering challenges that youth can do at home using recyclable materials, using things that they might have at the home. So one example is making trash flowers. How can you make flowers from trash at home? Something that requires minimal youth supervision from a parent, but is fun and engaging. And we actually have rewards for youth who turn them in. So something to occupy youth's time, continue on some of those science practices that they've been learning during the school day, and another project that they can do just to occupy themselves. From this, we've been reaching out to all of our families just to see how they're doing, the ones we have connections with, and providing them updates on our programs, letting them know about our summer program and making sure that we communicate around that and how we're planning for a virtual program, and just letting them know that when we have more information about what that looks like, we'll provide that to them as well, but letting them know that we want them to be with us this summer, whether that's virtual or in person. And then lastly, we've created our own City Sprouts at Home webpage. So folks who hear about City Sprouts, teachers or families, or even youth themselves can go to this website and learn more about what activities they can do, what our YouTube channel, and learn more about our effort to reach families, youth, and teachers during the COVID-19 crisis. So there's a lot that we're doing, and I don't have much time, but if you are interested in hearing more, just reach out to me. I am happy to share any resources that we might have around that effort. And yeah, I'm pretty much done, Kari, so you can.
All right. Thanks so much, Solomon. Great to hear out of the gate from Lisette and Solomon. We're going to hear from two other folks from OST, and I just wanted to address that after the OST partner innovation presentations, we will hear back from Dr. Salim just on some clarification around summer that has been a part of the chatter. But as I put in there, I just really hope folks are focusing in on our colleagues and what they have to present. So let's move on to Justina Crawford from the Community Arts Center.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Justina. I'm the Director of Programs at the Community Arts Center. During COVID-19, we've been serving elementary through high school students and their families who are predominantly low income and Black and Brown within the Port community. Thanks in part to subsidies that we have from the state and additional local and national funding, we are able to continue to pay our staff to support the needs of young people and their families during this time. Since March 16th, our staff have made over 60 check-in calls to families to learn about their needs and ways we can support them through online programming. We've gathered from our weekly check-in calls that families are experiencing challenges relating to demanding schedules that are impacting their ability to participate in our programming, prioritize family time, demanding work schedules where youth have stepped up to care for their siblings, and juggling school tasks, all while feeling isolated and curious about the unknown end of the pandemic. Since our closure, we have prioritized staff scheduling, online sessions with youth and families, and family-parent engagement. We think and plan at 2 weeks at a time to assess our staff, our youth, and the family's needs in response to the virus. Staff are online 3 times a week, engaging with young people through small group mentoring sessions. We also have community sessions designed to connect young people to each other and different staff members, and group hangouts where parents can attend with their child. In addition, we provide weekly parent happy hours to help the parents unwind. And most importantly, we are developing staff supports that involved reduced work hours. So we have shorter work weeks to provide staff with personal time to have time to reflect, tend to, and care for themselves and their families, reducing program offerings to accommodate their shorter work weeks, but also paying attention to that so that we don't hurt our engagement. Financial coaching, mental health coaching, and then also looking at short-term stipends to offset costs of working from home. Thus far, we've engaged with over 40 participants online, and this number is duplicated, but we're seeing that youth and parents are attending with us at least once to twice a week. And we're looking forward to exploring ways to send materials home to families to encourage art making in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Justina. More wonderful updates about how our programs are engaging with youth and families in many creative ways. So lastly, on this section, we're going to hear from Melissa Castillo from Cambridge Youth Programs.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Melissa Castillo from Cambridge Youth Programs. Cambridge Youth Programs is a network of 5 youth centers in Cambridge. That is the Moses, Moore, Frizzoli, Gately, and Russell Youth Center. Since we closed, we serve young people preteen, middle school, and teens, and each and every one of those young people in our program get weekly phone calls. We centralize and we center relationships for our young people when we are in person and now virtually. So every week, all our young people get phone calls from our amazing staff, and bi-monthly families get their own calls to check in with them, to see how they're doing, and to figure out how we can best support them. We have virtual programming happening daily. And that can range from community meetings, from different skill building workshops, from fun activities, trivia, and to be goofy and happy and fun together, but also skill building. 2 workshops that I'll highlight is one that was very popular is that young people are leading their own workshop with the support of staff. And to really put young people in that leadership role in this moment is so special to us because that's aligned with our values. And the other workshop that we had many young men in our teen program attend is a financial workshop. And what we realized is that many of our teens are thinking about a lot of the similar things that our adults are thinking about. And that was a really popular workshop. We are now thinking about the future and what the summer looks like for us. Some of the pieces that we're thinking about is delivering kits for supplies that our programs require, as well as incentives, fun incentives like a delivery of pizza because you won our financial challenge, or our trivia, and the skill building workshop to keep that central to who we are and to provide opportunities for our young people. The other piece is that before this began, we were rolling out success plans for all of our teen members. And so success plans will have an opportunity for young people to create goals, to think about what are barriers that come up, to think about what are the things that they're proud of, that they own and they know that they're good at, and to highlight that. And each success plan with the young person will be accompanied by a champion. That's an adult staff person that's going to be partnered with them to make sure that they accomplish their goals on their success plan. And we are committed to begin that in the summer. And so we are excited about that opportunity and are providing training for our staff to be able to do that. And then the last piece that this opportunity has presented with for virtual programming and to work together in a different way. I will share that for us at Cambridge Youth Programs, and I extend it to all of us here, is that this is an opportunity that now has taken away the physical buildings that have separated us in the past, and now has been able to give us an opportunity to take away the names of those buildings, to take away those walls that we put up ourselves or that are physical, and now we get to work together in a different way. And so at CYP, we're thinking about that for the summer. How can we do different things? What could that look like? And really reimagine how we work together for the service of our young people. And so that is what we're hoping our summer looks like with you.
Yes, Melissa, thank you. Make sure I'm not on mute. And that rounds out the highlights of some innovations and practices going on across OST since the closure. And as Melissa just mentioned so eloquently, looking ahead, into the summer and just understanding that we are in a big moment of transition and evolution. I want to now, as folks may have seen in the chat, I just mentioned a moment ago, I want to swing it back to Dr. Salim. And I don't know if Lindsay had anything else she wanted to add, but folks are asking some points of clarification around the summer updates. One question is around whether CPS is intending to run summer school for more students, if there's some kind of summer program that would be compulsory or required that could actually impact the ability for students to participate in other summer programs, OST programs or summer camps. And there's some other questions around those themes. Really excited again to have the engagement and to get these updates. And I know all of them aren't crystal clear in terms of how we're trying to communicate on Zoom. So thanks for the additional clarification for our 84 plus participants today. So
Yeah,
thank you.
sure. Thanks, Kari. And, you know, just in sort of bringing this together, just also wanted to thank Lindsay for being a part of also pulling together, you know, kind of the ICTS and the Agenda for Children and all the different partners here. So the purpose of the slide was really to sort of give a sense of how we're thinking around our building spaces, you know, with the idea around starting with distance learning or kind of remote setting, and then hopefully transitioning back into the buildings. We are not looking at doing a district-wide summer school for all students. However, you know, we do know that our students have missed 61 days or will have missed 61 days of school. And so as we are looking at the needs of students, the existing programs that we have, Title I programs, the Summit literacy-focused programs, and other CPS programs may be looking at expanding the participation and enrollment there. But it is not intended to be something that we're looking at sort of district-wide. I think I just also have to be really candid in that with the transition into buildings, there is just so much unknown in terms of what we can actually even do in buildings and just the limitations that will also exist due to the pandemic in terms of the numbers of students that may be in a particular space. And so, you know, I hope to continue to work collaboratively on ways that we can, you know, for those students that have significant academic needs, we want to make sure that we also think about how they also are engaging in important enrichment activities as well. And so it is, you know, I think we're at a time when, you know, we don't have all the answers and there's so much that's uncertain, but want to at least, you know, use this time really just to share our current thinking at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Salim. I just want to recognize in terms of where we are in the agenda and the time. And so we are going to do some breakout groups next. And given that we took a little extra time for Q&A and some clarification, there's one other question which I actually don't mind putting out there to see if we have an answer to yet. We would probably, if we stay sort of with the amount of time we're allotting, go over 5 or so minutes, maybe a little more than 5 for people who can hang in there. But we really want the breakout group time to happen. And so let me just put this question out to, I think Lindsay would be somebody who could give us a sense of whether this is something we can answer at this point, which is around what are the number, or sort of what do we know about the number of students who are not engaging or families that have not been reached, and anything on that front. Lindsay, people are asking. I know we heard from the OST folks what they're doing, but say if you could share anything else, that'd be great.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so it's a bit of an involved question. I don't have a quick answer prepared. I apologize. So we've been working in a variety of ways with families and our family liaison crew to do some differentiated and tiered outreach and really focusing on those that are most vulnerable. We are this week taking into account those survey results that are actually individualized results from individualized families, and we'll use that information to do targeted outreach to families with the specific things they're saying they need help with. As for students who are have not been as engaged or have been maybe engaged but are starting to dip off, there is a concern that families and students are maybe going into a next phase where they, even if they have been engaged, may become less engaged. So we're going to be using a couple of different strategies to reach out. And one of those will be getting some of that information from schools about the specific families and students that they are most worried about, and how can we use that information to partner with you all to, so that you know folks that maybe aren't engaging in school but are engaging with you, and how can we collaborate from both sides, or all sides rather, it's not really just two sides, all sides, to see what those families need and how we can reach them and support them. So it's a complex answer. I don't have a single soundbite for you on that, but it's one of our #1 priorities in the coming weeks. And I should say also those data pieces that Steve and Gina talked about earlier, where we will be able to quickly have more information that's really easily accessible about which students are connected to which programs, will help us do that much more easily moving forward. So if, you know, if John isn't showing up and John's family isn't responding to anything, and the school can then look at John's profile and say, oh, well, they're enrolled in X program, then that can more easily support then that a communication collaboration between the school and the program to say, hey, we haven't heard from these folks, we haven't been able to reach this kid, how can we share what we know and reach them better. So that'll make the work as a system better in the short and long term.
Great, thank you. I was having a little bit of a problem with my sharing here, but we're about to move into breakout groups, and let's see, you're going to experience kind of being moved into a room, and I'm going to try to post the, here we go, sorry, folks, the prompts that we're going to use in that room. Can we get the breakout groups moving? And basically, you're going to have a chance to talk about what we just heard in terms of updates, what's standing out to you, what additional questions you have. There's a Google Doc. So here we go. You're going to be in a group. I'm not sure if it's going to be as many as, 5 or 6 folks, maybe a little bit more in your group. We'll try to split up the CPS folks to spread us around. Jennifer, children people also be in rooms, spread us around.
And you guys, I'm going to put you in the breakout groups, but I might need to move you really quickly, so don't get freaked out if you disappear. You'll go into another space. Okay, ready? Goodbye.
So folks who are back, we're going to have time for a couple of groups to give some report outs. We did have a little technical difficulty there. You could tell in the transition. We were hoping you had the prompt that we really just want to hear a headline from each group in terms of what you discussed. And if we're going to have a couple report out verbally, and then for the rest of the groups, as tricky as this might be, if we could have you try to include a headline or an update from your conversation in the chat bar. Just in terms of time, we are up against the clock, and I want to respect that. We took a little extra time for some more Q&A, which was valuable. So again, to repeat, if we could have a couple groups give a headline from your conversation, and then the rest of the groups, if you could add to our chat line something from your conversation, and then we will close out with some next steps. So who would like to just go ahead and do a little popcorn, just like maybe 2 or 3 groups, give us a quick headline from what you all discussed.
I'll go. This is Mercedes. I was in group 14 with Catherine and Janine. And the thing that was exciting was just the energy of the OST providers and just the creative ways that people are prioritizing relationships both with staff and students, and just really centering and keeping connected with our young people and families.
Thanks, Mercedes. Can we have another group? Like 18 of them. Yep.
I can go.
Thank you.
So I was in a group with Carmen, Justina, Sue, and Susan. And what we discussed was that given the fact that we have to shift our programming and potentially serve less young people, that we should really think about who those young people are and to make sure those are young people who really need our services. We've talked about potentially going and having maybe a smaller summer camp. So I think that's something for us to think about, and also mental health and our young people with IEPs. How are we providing them with the services that they need?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nalita. And I see some groups are going ahead and putting their stuff into the chat. I really appreciate that. Let's do one more group.
Kari, I can go. It's Anthony Galuccio. How you doing?
All right. How you doing, Anthony?
How's Kosi?
He's all right. Thank you. He's trying to,
the good old days. I think what we talked a little bit just about, getting today's challenges dealt with, because, not wanting to lose the remediation and enrichment programs that we have over the summer that exist, and making sure that we don't lose the opportunity to protect those. I think the main theme was engagement. Like, it's counterintuitive for some systems to not control sort of their world. And in this environment, engaging parents and families to help tackle teachers, program folks to tackle all these new problems. We just have to open the doors and do things differently and sort of cede control. And I think we closed talking about just the lack of overall participation in the survey. And that as an indicator that we need to reach out to new groups and new sort of new bridges to folks to get them to participate in sort of where we are now, and then how do we tackle challenges and weaknesses that we acknowledge exist.
Terrific. Thank you, Gooch, and thanks for the groups that reported out. Nice range of topics there, and even more coming into the chat line. So to round out here, let me make sure I can see my screen. We'll do one last sort of in chat hot take. We're asking that, again, with the number of people we've had on here, it's really hard to have everybody's voice heard. So I appreciate people's patience and those with the urge to hear from everybody. We can't fulfill that with this, but we would like you in one word to talk about how you're feeling right now. And that can go again in the chat. We will save all this chatter, if you will, and we will have it, a version of it summed up in the notes. In terms of next steps, there's going to be more communication. We've already heard that in terms of updates on the summer and the uses of buildings. That will include a doodle for a mid to late May Zoom discussion again about summer efforts. And then we also have the idea of possible working groups on subtopics. And that could be, you know, with different folks from both CPS and the out of school time world, also the STEAM initiative. Big ups to them. They've been helping out with this whole presentation, and they've been strong team members throughout, as you know, with Charlene, Barb, folks in the libraries as well. So we could have some working groups, and they could focus on, you know, IEPs. They could focus on content. They could focus on communication. They could focus on projects, some other ideas, and also we may do some things with principals at some point. So that's what's ahead. We're living in this Zoom, I guess, world. That's how I feel, at least. And now you all soon, in terms of your follow-up to get access to the CPS Google Suite, will also be learning about Google Meet as a way to connect with your students, if that's something you would like to do. With that, I think we can call it a session. And again, extra big thanks to all the folks who came on today, all the folks who presented today, all the patience you had with the little bit of technical glitches at the end there. And we look forward to doing more of this. It's really important we stay connected, and we are one community. We're going to go further together if we move like one. All right, folks. Thank you so much.